Nancy Pelosi, the hair salon hypocrite.
And welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. The most powerful elected US Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, visited recently a hair salon in San Francisco, but she broke the rules that only allow the service outdoors, and this was in order to control the spread of coronavirus. Now, Miss Pelosi has also seen with a face mask, but around her neck rather than over her mouth. Now, many people have criticised her, and in fact, actually even called her a hypocrite, because she heavily criticised President Donald Trump for not wearing a mask. And this has been featured all across social media. Really, it's about the hidden truth. A hypocrite can fast outwit those who are naive, where double dealing gives false feeling with the deceit they can conceive. But a hypocrite will never admit what they believe, and very revealing when it's themselves they do deceive.
Yeah.
So, Clergyman Pete, I ask you, are we seeing a world which is opening up the world for hypocrisy?
Yes,
I ask,
yes,
is
we
that
are.
what we're dealing with?
That's the sort of world that we're living in. Yes, I think society has grown to accept too much dissimulation, lying, bearing false witness. The
Yes.
ninth commandment of the famous Ten Commandments is, "Thou shalt not false witness against thy neighbour." In other words, you shouldn't lie seriously trying to misrepresent someone or misrepresent yourself to other people. You shouldn't do that. And that, the Ten Commandments being this for a lot of the morality as you grow up in the West, the Christian understanding that it was important to have integrity and that lying is simply wrong, allowed us to develop our societies such that the economy would boom. We could have free trade with people honouring contracts, and it would be against the norm. It would be frowned upon, and you knew it that if you were to lie, and it allowed us to develop a society where there was enough trust generally that you could have respect for people in authority, knowing there were people of integrity, but there'd be some bounders. Obviously, be a general attitude of
Yes.
that integrity was important. So a general obey this ninth commandment, and we don't have that. We're losing that, such that we expect people to lie, to bear false witness. We just assume it. I mean, this is where I believe that old joke goes. It's become an old joke by now. How can you tell, goes the question, how can you tell if a politician is lying while their lips are moving? And I think that's how far we've come in society, that integrity has been dropped.
Yes. Well, we look to
Yeah.
politicians, dare I say, to set examples. Now, let's just clarify the point here, because what has happened is a well-known media organization basically actually broadcast some footage, CCTV, of Nancy Pelosi inside the premises of this salon, and she wasn't wearing a mask around her face. And although it's clear she has a mask available to her, Miss Pelosi, who normally wears a mask in public, often admonishes Republicans to listen to the science on the pandemic. But the thing is that has she really now just been a hypocrite? Now, she has said openly in public and on media interviews that she was set up. And this is basically not putting things in context. But the fact is that she wasn't wearing a mask, and she should have been. But this isn't just about Nancy Pelosi, is it? I mean, I want to also mention that there are other people that perhaps have been accused of hypocrisy. Now, I know that, Clergyman Pete, we talked before the show about Donald Trump. Who again has often been criticised for being a bit of a hypocrite. Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that recently in the White House, Mr. Trump appeared live to preside over a naturalization ceremony for immigrants, and was hypocritical because Mr. Trump had taken steps previously, as say, to restrict legal immigration. as to crack down on illegal immigrants. Now, is it that he has been hypocritical? On the one hand, he's saying we don't want people to come into the country, and yet on the other hand, he's sort of giving a naturalization ceremony. So let's not dwell on it too much, but where do you think that on the
in that
hypocrisy
particular
scale
case,
Donald
I think
Trump sits?
the problem with it is that the idea that he's trying to reduce legal immigration is the view of his opponents. You know, he himself would claim, "I'm not trying to restrict it at all. In fact, I'm trying to encourage it." Hence the ceremony. The where the idea of him trying to restrict it comes from, he restricted immigration from certain countries. And of course, he restricted flights famously from China quite recently because of the problem with the coronavirus. So I don't necessarily think that is hypocritical. He was trying to make a point. I think the example of hypocrisy really, in that case, is his opponents putting that onto him, because they themselves have in the past been against too much immigration. People such as, for example, Barack Obama was saying that you need to tightly control immigration. And he was very much in favour of that. Of course, Trump was for it, and then he's changed his opinion.
Yes, I do believe and understand that some people believe that Donald Trump's whole presidency has been one big hypocrisy. But I wanted to sort of maybe expand beyond that, because I want to sort of bring it from a business perspective, because I do have a view, as many people will know listening to this podcast, that there has been a number of issues of hypocrisy in business, and I'm going to highlight one. And this is about how business leaders spout the idea of long-termism, in the sense that they tell their employees they want people to work hard and go for the long term. You are loyal to a company, you build your credibility, you build your career around staying with a company and essentially enjoying the profits and the fruits of your labor. The problem with that, this is where I see there's a bit of hypocrisy. He only stays in their role for around 5 years, and somehow managed to sort of go off into the sunset with a large package. And I mean, I'm talking about a large pile of money. And it does seem to grate on people, where on the one hand they're saying one thing, that you want people to be loyal to a company, and yet on the other, those who are saying it are
long term enough. You're not. Do you think then, Mark, that hypocrisy, is a level of hypocrisy, even though it's sort of assumed and tolerated really amongst politicians, it's called out, but we just sort of expect it. Do you think that the real harm is in business? Harming really the whole of the economy by preventing businesses from thriving.
Well, there were two things you mentioned there. So there's the political side, i.e. those who govern the nation, and we'll talk about that because I've got comments on that. But on a business level, yes, I think that what's happened is that in the 21st century, that those at the top are playing a much shorter game than ever before. If we look at, through history, let's go back to the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century, nobody's going to dispute the fact that those that are top typically tend to have the better prize, the better positions, and they're better rewarded. And you credentials, credibility, skills, strengths, and experience. But what we're seeing today is that those traits are there, those elements, those foundation points are definitely there. However, what we're seeing is that by the nature and the mechanism of the way that businesses run, particularly those now where they're publicly quoted, those publicly quoted companies where people have to report to the markets, they're playing a very short-term game, because they have to report normally quarter by quarter. In some cases, that they're on the calls month by month to investors, analysts, and many other people that they ultimately have to report to. And so what that means is that the prize is shorter term. If they start to sort of think about their whole task in the way that they are set out, most people in the executive board have very short-term goals, Whereas somebody who's lower down will have a long-term career path. They'll think about how they want to develop their career, their skills. Whereas people at the top typically tend not to be there for very long. And I think that that's damaging to a number of areas. One, it's damaging to the individual business. Two, I think it's actually damaging to the rest of the workforce, because a lot of people do join companies because they believe that the leaders that they're actually going to be working for are there to help them, and they like the society changing the way that they think about how they plan their lives. I don't see how anyone can plan their lives long term anymore.
Well, what I see is a lack of planning. That's my general impression. You say, is there changing the way people plan their lives? I think that people don't plan for long-term careers in the sense that we thought it before. We would think of a lifetime gradually building a career, building skills, building networks, building trust with those with whom you deal, and that I think has been lost. I think part of it is due to something I mentioned quite a lot, which is a lack of religious conviction, nominal or not. There's a lack of, as I was mentioning earlier, of an assumption about how you should behave.
Just to interrupt on that point, is that religious conviction, in my opinion, is long-term.
Exactly
in the sense that you build your long-term life plan, and even in certain cases business plan, because the integrity and the essence of business, we talked about that on previous Mark and Pete shows. But yes, that's for the long term.
But also that there is a sense in which the change in jobs, changing the nature of jobs through technological changes, has meant that people have had to change jobs in many cases several times, change career paths several times. So there's a phrase that you can become punch drunk. You keep getting hit by things. There's a sense that things are changing too fast for people to be able to plan. And
so is there hypocrisy then around the fact that we're told by politicians that we should lead our lives in one way, when in actual fact the reality is that we're having to lead our life in another way?
I think the politicians are being caught out the same as the rest of us, trying to plan. But you see, if we're all honest with each other, there wouldn't be the same issue, and this is where the integrity comes in. And I think that leadership in business and leadership in politics are very important. If the leader understands you, if the leader has integrity so that you can believe them, then you're in a good position, because at least you'll be able to trust your leaders. The Bible has this famous phrase where Jesus says, "Woe to you," at least in the authorized version, the old King James version, it says that. This is, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves don't enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to get in." And that from Matthew chapter 23, verse 13, talks about how being a hypocrite, and actually Jesus was using just the norm, but we get the word hypocrite from that. You're just acting a part, and the rest of it
being hypocritical. We've covered many things, from politicians to people in society. So I wanted to sort of ask you, listeners, what's your thoughts, first of all, on Nancy Pelosi, who has repeatedly criticized Donald Trump's decision to largely spurn face coverings, wear masks? Has she been a hypocrite? Why not log on to Mark and Pete and let us know your thoughts? We'd love to hear you about this one. And please, if you do happen to visit a hair salon, perhaps you might ask. Well, join us again next time for Topical Topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.